session of a new series called Celebrating Asian Legal Careers. What the Asian Law Centre wanted to do was to take the words that William has used often, which is you cannot be what you cannot see. And that is that there are so many different ways in which people navigate careers that are relating to Asian jurisdictions. It may be that they come from an Asian jurisdiction and work here, maybe that they work in an Asian jurisdiction, maybe they work on topics. And so there's so many different paths to an Asian legal career broadly, that what we wanted to do was to provide an opportunity for esteemed members of the community who've already trodden that path, that precarious path. Come in, sit down, please. Over many years, to build a career where there wasn't a path before. It's a way for you to meet senior members of the community, important and influential people who might help you. You never know. But also for you to see that an Asian legal career is something that you can build for yourself. And you might build it in a range of different ways. And so this seminar series is really designed to sort of provide some concrete information, encouragement, whatever. And so today I'm delighted that William Lai, QC, OAM, has agreed to come and to start this seminar series. William has been at the bar for many years, has been an esteemed barrister for many years, and is also now at the moment sort of in charge of the Ukrainian support sort of group, and has also devoted himself over pretty much your entire career with your wife to supporting sort of Asian Australian lawyers, to building up an inclusive community, one which is supportive and one which seeks to overcome the bamboo ceiling, as it's called. You know, and for young women, it's glass and bamboo. It's a pretty dangerous mixture of ceilings to have. But has worked in a very concrete, dedicated, and long-term way to support young Asian Australian lawyers. And so today I am so delighted to invite you just to come and share your experience. Any good words of advice for all of us, because, you know, being a young person, I'm still making my career as well. And so I think we make our career until we die. So thank you, William.
Thank you. Come and sit around closer, so I don't have to turn left or right. Given that it is such a cozy group of people, and at least half of them I know, so I have to disclose that I know Nayan from way back, ST as well. So it's not contrived that I ask people I know to come.
Yeah.
But thank you, Professor Sarah Biddleton, and I do want to acknowledge Professor Chin as well here, and Catherine, who has very kindly organized this session. I think, like every good barrister, there's always a well-prepared script, but given the circumstances, maybe I should just throw out that script and talk to everyone about just my experience. I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are here today, and the culture and heritage that we have been fortunate enough to share with the traditional owners of the land, the elders past, present, and those who are emerging, is truly remarkable. Until you take that step to go to Uluru, you may not know what it means to be connected to country. And this is why Australia is such a special place. When Sarah and I discussed about this series, I was thrilled that I was asked to kick it off, and hopefully it will be the beginning of many good conversations that we can all have. And I thought what would I want to speak about? And everyone would have heard the saying, you cannot be what you cannot see. And if students who may be watching this recording, it's certainly not, you cannot see what you cannot be. And that's something that we don't want to even think about, because then you limit your ability. But when I look back at that phrase, it is a phrase that is not attributable to me. It's attributable to Marian Wright Edelman, who is now 83 years old. And she is an activist in children's rights. She started defense of children's rights. She was born in South Carolina, and she was indeed the first African American woman to be admitted to the Mississippi Bar back in 1964, a long time ago. She's also the first African American woman to be on the board of trustees for Yale University. That's where she did her law degree. So she come from that background with many firsts. And it's really apt that she coined that, because it inspires the other generation to want to dream to be what they can then see. And so that's what I really want to talk about. But before I do that, just some statistics is always very useful. When I came to Australia to study law at Monash University, that was back in 1982 when I commenced. Australia had a population of just under 15 million people. And Malaysia, from where I come from, was about 14.4 million people. Today, Australia is about 26.1 or so million people, inching to 27 million people in the next year or so. And Malaysia is about 34 odd million people, overtaken. When you think about Victoria then, Victoria had maybe about 2-3 million people. Now it's about 5 odd million people. Within the region, Singapore, when I left, Singapore was maybe about 2.5 million people. Today is about 5.9 million people. And we've got neighboring countries like Indonesia, I think about 200 million people or just less. And other countries like China, 1.4 billion. And, they tip a bit more than India, which is also about 1.4 billion. So I think China is about 1.45 and India is about 1.4. So it's a very large group of people, and the latest census show us that Australia is changing. And when the beginning of our country, there were the English, the Scottish, the Irish, the Germans, and the Chinese. That was when those people migrated or came without choice to Australia. And today, the demographics in terms of ancestry is pretty much similar. English, Australians, the Irish, the Scottish, but we have the Italians as well. We still have the Chinese, dwindling in numbers, but increasing in terms of just comparison to when they were. But we also have a large group of people from India who speaks Punjabi, Hindi. So other than English, Mandarin is the most widely spoken language. And then you have other languages like Hindi, Punjabi, Tamil, and of course, Arabic comes next after Mandarin, which is a very large group of people speaking the language. And I bring the statistics up because it's important to know context, because context informs us as to what we can see or what we can't see. And when I started the law, there were people from my country who came here to study at Monash. That's where I went to. I'm not sure about Melbourne, but I'm sure it'll be about the same. a lot of Southeast Asians came to this country to study all manners of subjects. And the law was one of those areas where I knew nothing about when I first came to study. Having done my computer science degree and law now, I can see the benefits then that I couldn't see. But today is a different thing altogether. We have a large group of people from Southeast Asia, from other countries, indeed even from the Northern Hemisphere, from America, coming to study law. I've had one legal assistant who was from Chicago, New York, coming here to Melbourne University to study law. And so things are changing. But what about the legal profession? The legal profession is a conservative profession. In Malaysia, the last time I looked in, I think 2019, there were close to 20,000 lawyers practicing in Malaysia. In Singapore, there's about 5,000 lawyers. In China, for example, through my work with the Asian Australian Lawyers Association, we hosted about 70 plus lawyers from Jiangsu province in the last few years before COVID. And I got to know many of them very well because through the Asian Australian Lawyers Association, we made every one of them honorary members of the association. And in China, I was told that you have to sit for a national examination to be a lawyer. And it is like one of the hardest things you can ever do. And if you pass, you are certainly in the top group of people who are smart and intelligent and very capable. And many of the lawyers graduating from that national examination go on to do a postgraduate degree. They come to Australia or Europe to study a master's and indeed further to a PhD, as we have a student here doing that as well. But there are about 300,000 lawyers, maybe a bit more now. And majority of them started in private practice when the government there opened up the practice in the 90s. And that's where King & Wood came from, and now King & Wood Mallesons. And so it is a tough process in China, because I'm told that in Beijing or in Shanghai, with 20 million plus people, there's maybe 20,000 licensed lawyers. It's a very small group of people practicing in the law. And yet, collegiate, as part of that college or collegiate legal profession, we all share the same thing, and that is to understand the legal principles, to uphold the rule of law in the proper administration of justice. And yet, Australia's demographic is changing so much that we don't see wide representation at the upper echelon of the legal profession. So, you know, just looking at some other statistics, for example, in 2020, the national profile of solicitors conducted by IRBIS has about 83,000 practicing solicitors in Australia. That number is really small compared to other countries. This is the whole of Australia as well. The Victorian Bar has 2,000 odd members. I think in 2021, it has 2,165. In the whole of Australia, as at, I think, 2021, there's about 6,300 barristers practicing at the independent bar. And of course, the bulk of the barristers come from New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland. Similarly, in the solicitor profession. And so there is a small pool of specialists in Australia practicing in Victoria. But what about gender? Gender, again, is pretty poor. For example, in Victoria itself, about 1,475 are male and 690 are female, out of about 2,165 barristers as at 2021 or June 2021. The proportion of those who are at the inner bar, in other words, a QC or senior counsel, is even less. For male is 11.6%, but female is 1.9%. Very, very small in terms of the people who break the bamboo ceiling, glass ceiling, and dare I say the concrete ceiling. So for those who are culturally diverse, one does face all those three ceilings, one after another. You break one and then you think you've reached, and then you've got another one, and then you've got another one. It's like the stakes change as you achieve your goal. So I want to talk really ultimately about the journey that I have been in, laying the foundation that this is what we are faced with. And so I've been here for 40 years and in the law for 35 years. And it's been a rewarding time for me, but I didn't know what I didn't know then. And so when I started at the Victorian Bar, there was only one other Asian barrister, Nimal Wikrama QC. He's now well retired, and he comes from Sri Lanka. And for at least 10 years, I saw nobody who looked like me. And people wouldn't even probably think I was a member of the Victorian Bar. And it was difficult. It was challenging. There were no mentors, no one to guide me. And even Nimal had his own issues that he himself faced. And dare I say, in some of the work that's published or in the media, he still seems to be bitter about the way how he was treated, again, rightly or wrongly. I never felt any discrimination when I was at the Victorian Bar, but I think it's more the unconscious bias. And that's probably more difficult because it takes a lot longer to get there because you don't have someone to mentor you in the first place. And then more importantly, to get anywhere, you need someone to sponsor you, to champion you. So take you under their feet and then to give you the opportunity to push you. First they pull you in and then they push you out. And that is the difficulty that most people of color will face. But it is not impossible because as a third generation racially Chinese background, born in Malaysia with Singaporean roots as well from my mother's side, hey, you know, I'm here 40 years later speaking as one of Her Majesty's Counsel. First Malaysian-born Chinese to be so appointed in the history of the bar. The bar started in the mid 1800s in Victoria, and certainly as a formal bar in the 1900s. And the first barrister of Chinese descent came from this school. And he would have roamed around the old law school building that you have here, the magnificent ground. And his name appears downstairs on the pillar, graduating with the Supreme Court Prize in 1902. And he finished up his articles at Maddox in 1903 and then came to the Victorian Bar in 1904. So here was a man born in 1876 and died in, I think, 1926. Unfortunately, he was still young in his 60s. In 1936, that's when he died. But he wasn't the first in the world. The first barrister of Chinese descent in the world is a man called Wu Tingfang. And he was born, some might say, in Malacca or in the Straits Settlement, maybe in Singapore, maybe in Malacca, which is north of Singapore in Malaysia. But he schooled in Hong Kong and learned Mandarin, and then he was sent to study law in the United Kingdom. And he got admitted to be a barrister in 1876 in Lincoln's Inn. the first ever. So Southeast Asians who hail from south of China migrated down the Southeast Asia and everywhere else. They've done very, very well. They found a new land. They worked hard. But just imagine if you were them in those days. You were the only person of color that no one else looked like you. How would you then navigate yourself through this cultural journey to reach heights? Now, William Marquette never made silk. He was never appointed a judge, and yet every one of his peers who were significant practitioners who made onto the bench, either in the Supreme Court or the High Court or as senior counsel, they've all spoke very highly of him. So fast forward over 80 odd years, I then came to the Victorian Bar. And I didn't know that there was no other person who looked like me. And there were some who had mixed heritage at the bar with anglicized name, but they never told anyone about their cultural background, either through maternal side or just through time being in Australia 4 or 5 generations. They stuck to themselves. They didn't band together because there was no one else who looked like them. And they were concerned, obviously, with perhaps the stigma of being different. And I think what we can all learn from some of these wonderful things is that that the pioneers have paved the way. So imagine, so the topic that I started out is you cannot be what you cannot see. Now, once you can see, then there is opportunity to dream, to be, but you have to work at it. But at least you have that opportunity to imagine that you can be. And to work at it takes a lot of time. So imagine that you're on this journey along to that end. And how do you do it? And a lot of students who ask me the question, what did you have to do? And I didn't know what I had to do. I just did. And ultimately, the journey has to begin within. Everyone comes from a tribe or a mob, as the Aboriginals would refer to their group, a belonging somewhere, whether it's from Malaysia or Singapore or China or within China, from Shanghai, Beijing or Nanjing, or from parts of Ireland or Scotland or England, wherever one comes from, one has to leave one's inner tribe or neighborhood to go somewhere to make, and that's the beginning. And the people who do go saw something. They saw from afar, as the eye can see, the mountain. We can see beautiful buildings here being built over time. But in the old days, it was just a flat land. And as far as the eye can see, you can see another mountain peak there, but you've never actually been there. The journey might, and you don't really know what the journey is going to be like to get there. And ultimately, you got to have that resolve to want to go. So if you want to see the view, you have to climb the mountain. There's no other way. Otherwise, you'll be seeing the same thing in the valley. And to climb the mountain, you've got to then take that step to go. But to go alone can be very lonely. It can be uncertain. So that's where one navigates through this process. Now, I use this as really an analogy to my own life as the journey that I did. Spend the early years, of course, being trained, and then take the time to just contribute and give. never expecting anything in return, but wanting to learn and finding new ways of doing things. No one was there to guide me. No one helped me. No one gave me a handout. I had to think, how do I get experience? How do I create opportunity in order for me to then get runs on the board, rather than rely on people you know from the same school, from the same university, from the same group. Being alone out here, being different, you can either resolve to stay as it is, or you resolve to see that view from afar and say, I'm going to go to that mountain. You don't know how high it is. You don't know what's in store, but you know that if you start making that journey, you will meet people along the way as well. You will find people that you may not have seen before from another tribe, from another place. And you start to navigate that culture, the multiplicity of culture that you see, so as to be able to share commonalities and come together to then walk that path together. Now, the law is very competitive. Everyone is out for themselves. I want to be the best, or I want to be number one. And so we don't train our law students, I have to say, to work collaboratively enough, because it is so competitive, because everyone's on a billable hour, everyone's promotion is dependent on how much money they bill, how much they bring in, all of that. But in numbers, we have the strength to collaborate. It will strengthen that idea generation that we have to get to the mountain top quicker, to see the terrain and to be able to navigate to the place where we want to go. And that's what I think is so important for the younger generation. And that is that you've got to recognize within yourself what your strengths are, and then let other people share with you what your weaknesses are. And then you understand. It's like the age-old saying that I like to say to a lot of my students, and that is that if you know yourself and you know the other person, then 100 battles that you might have, either in the mind or the challenges that you face, you will win. But if you only know yourself and not the other person, then you take your chance. It could be 50-50. You're lucky sometimes to overcome, but sometimes you won't. But the worst thing is to track down a pathway to a mountain top, not knowing yourself, not knowing the other who might be coming with you. You'll fail because you can't see your own limitations, and you don't know how to utilize your own strength to bring others along as well. That's a sage-old saying from Sun Tzu, the art of strategy. We all know that. And so, I'm guided by a lot of these principles in my practice. Never to wait for something to happen, always trying to see what can I do that's different. As an example, when I tried to, in the early days when I finished my studies and tried to apply for law firms, I could not get in any law firm. My wife was, on the other hand, very lucky. She got into a top-tier law firm as an experiment in diversity, gender diversity, and then throw in the bonus Asian. And she was one of maybe 2 Asian in that big national law firm, one of whom is an associate professor in the law school here and in the business school. They were colleagues, Professor Tabaluyan and my wife, who were both in Minter Ellison in those days. Whereas I was not lucky. So I trotted a more difficult path than my wife, who was trained by the top tier law firms to be the best of the best in what she does. So what did I have to do? I had to create things, find my own pathway to that mountain that I can see from afar, but don't really know what it is. I had to create work. I had to find mentors, in other words, QCs who would work with me and give me an opportunity to work with them so that I can learn. I had to network in a different way. I found what was incredible in those days is that the top tier law firms all went to the same school, whether it is Melbourne Grammar or Scotch College or some of those elite schools. And they had that network of people that they tend to use. An Asian barrister, unknown. Hardly any Asian lawyers in the law firms as well. So it makes it more difficult. But I share a common bond with women lawyers because they also felt the difficulty and challenges in rising up, being stereotyped to do certain types of work. And I found that in the early days, a lot of my work came from like-minded people, people who are diverse, for me, culturally diverse, for them, gender diversity, very lacking in the upper echelon of the courts and even the rank of senior counsel. Yeah. Former High Court Justice Susan Crennan was the #1 female senior counsel and female barrister in Victoria at the moment. She was appointed QC in 1989. So that tells you how early it is. That 1 year after I came to the Victorian Bar, we have Sue Crennan, who was appointed, and she made it to the High Court. And she's now the most senior woman at the Victorian Bar. So it tells me that women have also had it very difficult in terms of their progression, their rise. But things have changed because women banded together in the profession, supported one another, and agitated for change. And so you begin to see positive appointments to the courts. Chief Justices from the High Court to various Supreme Courts to governors in this state and other states. And so people can then see so that they can then dream or at least plan to work to be that it is not impossible anymore. What about people like myself who have now broken through those various ceilings? What are the lessons we can all learn? And I like to take the view that if I share my knowledge, skills, experience, I haven't lost it. And that's one important thing to encourage the young to share what they have learned. Somebody younger than you, you can mentor. That age is not the barrier. Somebody younger than you, perhaps less experienced, you can sponsor by helping. And by doing that, we go together towards this mountain top and to see what can be done. That mountain, of course, is the legal profession. And at the end of the day, when you think about that mountain, when you reach that bottom of the mountain, it's still going to be difficult to climb. For students, it is finishing their law degree. It's getting started and they've reached that bottom and then they start to climb. Now, for those who are pioneers, they've had to cut the shrubs and trees to clear the path. They don't have time to lay the bitumen on the road. All they can do is clear that because it takes years to do that. But as they begin to clear the shrubs and the trees and make a road up, they begin to see glimpses of the view. And ultimately, when they reach that top, there is that road pathway that they have taken and cleared so that others can follow. It is easier for others to trek to the top by seeing a pathway up. And when you're up at the top, the view is a panoramic view like this. in this magnificent building, and you can see even beyond at the top, beautiful, and you can see the valley, and then you see other mountain tops even further afield that you've never even saw when you were way back there. And that's when the exciting journey continue and begin. The challenges, how do I then get there? How do I then build my team of people, the group of people I work with well, in order to get there? And I think there are, I want to just finish this so that we can just have a good, chat and discussion about some of these things. This is my journey. And it hasn't been easy, and I've never sought any kind of recognition whatsoever. But at the end of the day is when you give, contribute, and others then recognize your contribution, recognition, that it means something important, because then other people can see. I'm a member of the Order of Australia. When I was appointed in 2017, I did everything I could to research into the appointment. The Order of Australia is an honor for Australian citizens and others who have contributed significantly to the country in terms of their services, all of that. And what struck me then were how many Chinese were there. So I did the research from the establishment of the order in 1975 up until about 2017, 2018. And I got the names of everyone that I could find. There are 5 levels in the order. The top level is no longer being appointed, which is the knighthoods and the dames, but the companion AC, and then you have the officer AO, and then you have the member AM, and you have the Order Australia Medal OAM, which I am at that level. And what I found in 2018 was that there were 217 Australians of Chinese background in the whole of Australia that ever got appointed or awarded. 217 out of how many? Out of 36,000 then. The number is now 49,000. And at the highest level, AC, there's only, I think, as we speak today, there's probably only 4, one of whom have passed away, Victor Cheng. 4 appointments, 1 in Victoria. And for a long time, the highest in Victoria was former Mayor John So with an officer, Kwong Li Dao, who's part of this wonderful fraternity, and AO. But in the law, when I was appointed in 2017, Australia Day, I was the only Chinese of Chinese background. And then there were only maybe 2, one in New South Wales for service to the law. So my award was for service to the law, to business, and to promotion of cultural diversity. Today, there may be only maybe 3 AMs, no AOs or ACs of Chinese descent who are lawyers or judges. And Rainer Tang is one of them, and Dr. Andrew Lu is another who got upgraded, I think, last year. So there's so few in the law. So we can't see those people honored by the nation. And yet, it's also few in the profession, because there's only maybe about 600 or less, all of Australia, and I include all the judges, all the senior members of the profession who have been awarded high honors. And so I just want to leave this group with just a few things that I think is important. We need to learn and encourage respect in terms of where we are. We need to learn to respect people so that they can respect us in turn and see us worthy of even their contribution, their input into our lives. Without that respect, we fail to achieve things. But respect's not enough. We need to do a bit more. That's a starting point. We need to have that recognition of the people who are in Australia egalitarian, but there is a hierarchy, there's a rank and status and pecking order, whether it's at the university, but that should not deter us. The recognition that we give to one another is also important. Those in power can also do something. Very often, I'm on the Council of Swinburne University, and I say to people that don't just confer honorary doctorates to people who look the same, or go look overseas to find Asians or others. There are so many people in your backyard that who've done so much that you can contribute that and honor them. Think about those things. It's a mindset change. It's to recognize people who are worthy, nominate people for the Order of Australia, because this is where we contribute to that betterment of our society. And of course, we got to learn to reciprocate. Reciprocation is giving, sometimes not expecting anything in return. And we need to be able to reciprocate, to look after one another in a way that we empower each other to be better. And of course, finally, restore the environment that we are in. And the reason is that when you clear the pathway to go up to the mountaintop, you've cleared something, and you've cleared it for others, the legacy for them to come up. But you need to restore so that you can renew growth. New growth will come. And that is important. So I really want to leave this with everyone, and a good reminder to me, you cannot be what you cannot see. But now that you can see, not just me, but others who have reached, then don't just dream to be, but work at being, because you got to be determined to be what you want to be. And that is the very important essence. Ultimately, to succeed, you've got to actually determine to be what you want to see. The future is what you determine to be. So thank you very much for just the opportunity to share that, some thoughts with you, and hopefully we can continue to engage in this wonderful series that Melbourne University has commenced on Asian Law Centre.
Thank you. That's, it's phenomenal. And, I can see that you're actually speaking to all of us in a way. I lived in China and I was the only foreigner. So I actually do know what it's like to be the only person who's a different colour. As if I was just a white colour. But the thing that I realised from that, and the thing that your speech really brought home to me, is the courage of people to step out, the courage of your spirit, and your determination, to do well, and I think also the generosity of spirit, which you have demonstrated throughout your whole life, and your generosity of coming and sharing your experience with us, because I think it gives us all hope. Would you like to say something, or ask a question, or share a reflection? Don't feel shy.
It's not just about the class learning breaking it, it's also people. And if you're at the generation trying to move forward, sometimes you find yourself stuck, you find yourself in the same groups doing the same thing. And so it's not just people trying to push forward, it's also people who are above or ahead, reaching back and trying to help others as well. I think William's a great example of that. He noticed he is that pioneer up ahead, And yes, he's still cutting down the branches, but he's also trying to make sure everyone that there is still coming up with. So it's not a solo venture. It's not, I'm going to be the first and I'm going to be the only one. It's, I'm going to be first and you're all going to help with me. Let's make this a community all going up together. So Julian's brought that knowledge and generosity, as you said, into many things, and that's part of it, where he does really well.
Oh, thank you for the kind words. I never set out to do any of that, not knowing that there is that kind of strategy. But I think when you reflect, and that's the important thing, that it just reminds me that if you hear something, you will forget. But if you see something, you will remember. But ultimately, if you do something, you will understand. Another Confucius saying, but it is very important, and I live by that philosophy, because we hear a lot of talk. We've got to change this, we've got to do this, and then we see some things, and seeing is about the action. So what are governments doing, for example, with appointments of people of color? In New South Wales, we now have Justice Nicholas Chen, who is mixed heritage. We've got Justice Delia, who is Arab, Egyptian. We've got Justice Daman Danji, Haman Danji, in Fijian Indian background, in the superior courts. In Victoria, we're yet to get there, other than we have Associate Justice Nimir Mukhtar. But in the county court, we have Vietnamese, Australian, mixed, Hong Kong, Singaporean, Australian. We've got Indian background. We've got Muslim background in the magistrates court, Malaysian background. So Victoria leads the way in terms of diversity of appointment. And yet you're right. Law students need to be reminded that it's not, it is a lonely race to the top of the law school, the profession, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And I'm glad that you brought this up, because it reminds me that things are worthwhile doing to help the younger generation.
Absolutely. And in fact, if you ask for help, you might find it in the places you may not have originally thought to get that sort of help. So it's great. I think that this shows us that that generosity. You have experiences of being alone, but that's not necessary. Now it's not necessary, and the thing we need are people who've gone before, like you, who are so generous, who are so insightful, and are willing to help people to come along, to solve problems, not to have to do those things themselves. And of course, William was instrumental in setting up the Asian Australian Lawyers Association, which in fact is designed specifically, I think, for mutual support and encouragement. And the Asian Law Centre does quite a lot with that. So I'm mindful that we are slaves to the clock. We are slaves to the clock, and so can I say that thank you.
Thank you.
Having you here today to launch